So social media has once again provided a platform for statistics without proper context to run rampant, making things seem much worse than they really are. This time it has to deal with the amount of land that China is supposedly buying or supposedly owns in the United States. And perhaps it's because of the TikTok ban thing passing, but this has been popping up more and more, this boogeyman of China. So the post I saw today read that China now owns 380,000 acres of our farmland. Then to be quippy, they went on to say, take all the time you need to think about that. Well, it doesn't really take that much time because Google exists. So after I posted my responses on Twitter to the dumb comments under this thread, and while I was writing this script to the video I'm making right now, Geopolitical said that he did a video on this, and I went and looked at it, and it was a really good video, and I was able to dump like half my script because he covered it already, so go check it out. He posted it on April 10th, and we came to the same conclusions. But let me summarize a bit and go a step further on why it does or does not matter that these countries are buying land, because it simultaneously doesn't matter, but also does matter, and you'll see why at the end. And if this sounds kind of familiar to you, I did a similar video back in like March of 2023 when I was doing my China dominance series and just was lazy and didn't want to go find that video to repost it, so here we are. Now, the United States has 880 million acres of farmland, which is the most in the world, and 97% of that land is owned by the US and its entities, which means that if China truly does outright own 380,000 acres of US farmland, it makes up all of 0.04% of total US farmland. China doesn't even own 1/20th of 1% of US farmland. But China owns forested land in the US as well, so that farmland number is even lower, something like 0.035%. But even that 380,000 acres doesn't tell the whole story. Often this land is rolled up into REITs, which are real estate investment trusts. And so China and other countries and businesses and individuals will invest into things like the Farmland Partners REIT or Gladstone Land REIT, and they own a portion of the land. And those are counted as ownership because they're listed on the ownership ledgers. These land investment firms essentially own the land, and then they allow investors to get in on the action. It's very similar to how a business will sell part ownership of itself as equities on a stock market. China has an investment problem right now in its own real estate sector, so it's pivoting to invest in safer real estate, which, lo and behold, is the US. But let's say for argument's sake that it is flat out true that China owns 380,000 physical acres of land in the US. At 380,000 acres of land, where do you think that puts China as the sole owner of land in the US? Number 1, top 5, top 10, 15? Or would you believe none of those? China is number 18. In fact, there are single individual families that own more land in the US than China. King Ranch in Texas, for instance, owns like 850,000 acres. But let's take a look at which countries own the most land in the US, and you might be surprised. So if you saw Geopolitical's video, he talked about this as well, and this is just a table showing similar numbers to what he showed. Canada is by far the number one owner of U.S. land when it comes to foreign investors. And it's not even close, like 12.8 million acres. And you have Netherlands, Italy. The United Kingdom actually invests in agriculture within the U.S. as a part of its pension program within its country. Germany, Portugal, you can keep going down. In fact, when I talked about King Ranch, they would fall like right in here. That's how big their ownership is. But what you don't see on here, once again, is China. So why do other countries buy land in the US? Is it some conspiracy to take over the US from the inside? Well, no, of course not. As with all things when it comes to investing, it is about money. The US is a safe haven for solid long-term stable investments, and US land and agriculture is no different. Often these countries will buy land so that they can lease it for things like wind farms or solar farms and reap the profits there. They will lease the land to American farmers and then get a percentage of the agricultural profits back because they know the American worker and the American business model are stable and profitable. But often these are not even countries themselves making the purchases. I mean, there are exceptions, with the UK being one and Canada being another, but the Chinese Communist Party itself has not purchased any land in the US. It is actually private corporations, hedge funds, and retirement funds that are purchasing these plots of land. And yes, they all likely report to the CCP in some way, shape, or form, but it is not the CCP buying this land themselves. But because there is a system of forced compliance to the Chinese Communist Party within China, there is a legitimate concern that some of this land could be purchased to spy on the US. Therefore, the primary concern is proximity to sensitive U.S. sites. For instance, in 2022, Fufang Group, which is a Chinese company, bought 370 acres for corn milling near Grand Forks Air Force Base in North Dakota. But this immediately threw up red flags in the intelligence community, and the Biden administration proposed rules that required foreign purchases of land within 100 miles of sensitive U.S. sites to go through a government approval process. But unfortunately, that bill is stalled in the Senate. In the meantime, the USDA was ordered to monitor such scenarios. But then you have the people that think there's some sort of capability being purchased by the Chinese here. Perhaps there's military or training grounds could be formed. And I ask, what exactly are they going to be able to do with this land? Like if a war starts with the US and they own the land in the US, are they going to just start building military bases to attack the US from the inside? Yeah, no, that's not how it works. They are still in our sovereign country. Trying to conduct any meaningful operations from the inside would be very much impossible for them. And the US would do something about it immediately. In a war with China scenario, that land would immediately be seized, and likely any Chinese nationals would be either deported or very closely watched. Now, harkening back to when I said earlier in the video that purchasing land in the US actually does matter, this is why. Other countries owning land in the US is a hedge against war. You're unlikely to attack the US if you own land in the US, if you invest in the US. The last thing a nation wants to do is have its businesses, government officials, retirement funds, investors, its people buy a bunch of land in another country, then have them lose it all because they decide to go to war against that country. You invest in another country because you think that country is going to remain stable, not with plans to make it unstable. The bottom line is this is a big nothing burger. It's a boogeyman that has been twisted to make a political statement that has nothing to do with reality. It's to scare ignorant voters, frankly. China bought land under Trump, and it has bought land under Biden. This is not new and is, frankly, a feature of the system, not a bug.